Swing your arms away from your body, move your legs out.
In the 1960s, Brian Duffy was a star, as famous as the people he photographed.
David Bowie, Bridget Bardot, Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Duffy was the best of them all. Best of them all by a long, long way.
I loved Duffy. He was very frightening, but he was the business, you know.
Duffy's iconic images of the 60s and 70s captured the spirit of a time when Britain defined cool and anarchy was in the air.
Charlton Heston, Terence Stamp. God, there's Putters, bless him.
In the cultural history of Britain in the 1960s, Duffy has a very significant place.
Sidney Poitier, Christine Keeler.
He changed the way photography was, or had been.
But at the height of his fame, Duffy did the unthinkable. He put down his camera and walked away for good.
Duffy literally went into the back garden with all his transparencies and negatives, made a big bonfire and burnt them.
I don't know why he stopped. I guess it was his bonfire of the vanities, I don't know.
He just wanted to do what he wanted to do in the way he wanted to do it, and if the rest of the world didn't like it, then tough.
Michael Caine, John Lennon, old McCartney and George Martin, William Burroughs, yes, Sammy Davis Jr. Lost the negatives on that. They got burnt. For God's sake, keep that sun there. No, no, it's good. Yeah, have we?
This is not a very elaborate setup, is it?
That's nice.
It's a great line.
Isn't it? That's wonderful.
It's June 2009, and photographer Brian Duffy is preparing for a shoot. His first in 30 years. Once a legendary name of the 60s and 70s, Duffy, now 76, hasn't shot a frame since he gave up photography and burnt a huge amount of his work.
Well, the purpose today is testing. I mean, whether I remember my left hand from my right, how do you focus, which eye do I use, what am I looking at? But having that, it just is second nature, just get going, boom, boom, boom. Nothing's different. It's literally 1978 since I last took a photograph.
Okay.
Today's session is just a dry run. Over the next few months, Duffy will shoot new portraits of favourite old sitters, leading up to the first ever gallery show of his work.
My approach always was the same, obsequious toadyism. Grabbing my forelock, and I think you can see my decline synonymous with the way my hair at the front fell out. I tell you the thing I've always been amazed at is looking into a camera lens at someone and they just change. And then all of a sudden you see something and you're not sure if you can discuss it because you're not sure if you're drunk or something. I always think of a photograph, if you look at it, you realise that in front of it, in time, there was something not very interesting. The photograph is absolutely interesting, and a fraction after is not interesting. There's a moment you think, what was happening at that very moment? If a photograph doesn't have that in it.
Throughout his career, Duffy worked non-stop. Celebrity, fashion, advertising, he did it all, quickly establishing himself as one of the stars of the London scene.
It's difficult to talk about Duffy without situating him alongside his peers. And that inevitably means the Duffy, Bailey, Donovan triangle.
Come down for a second.
There certainly is a school of English photographers. I call them the Black Trinity of Duffy, Donovan, and Bailey. Very good photographers in their own way.
Good. And
Before the laddish young snappers arrived on the scene, photographers were gentlemen in three-piece suits. But the East End boys threw out all the rules, putting the swing into 60s London and becoming icons for a new generation.
David Bailey makes love daily.
Brian Duffy, bold and scruffy.
Now, we're so used to models being really top of the tree, very well paid and looked after, but the photographers were the stars in those days, not the models.
Duffy has always been considered an enigma. He's rarely given interviews, has never published a book or sold a print of his work. And he would have been happy for it to stay that way, until his son, Chris, unearthed what was left of his father's archive.
I mean, some of my grandchildren didn't even know I'd been a photographer. Chris said to me, I found all this box of your stuff. And he said, it's quite interesting. So I said, eh? He's rejuvenated me, or sparked me up like the thing on the table, you know, with the bolts here.
This was a great picture here, this one. This was a full page.
God, I'd love to see these blown up. I really would.
When he decided to burn his legs and just stop taking pictures, he went off the radar. He went right underground. And it's kind of been my mission to put his legacy back up there, really.
God, where did I get that outfit? Look, I'm bollocking someone.
When I started looking at the material 3 years ago, he knew that he had contracted a degenerative lung disease, that it was time that he actually did start, or let me take the material and do something with it.
Long thought of as one of the Cockney photographers, Duffy was actually a North London boy, born to working-class Irish parents in 1933. The eldest of four, Duffy was just a boy when his father left to fight in the war, leaving him alone with his mother, two brothers, and a sister.
I had an enchanting childhood, running wild like a thug in the war, which I loved. I really mean it, I did enjoy the war. Bomb sites, nicking things wherever you could. No, I did enjoy the war. Well, it would appear it was very disruptive, but one didn't notice it. I was a rather wonderful child, an all-round wizard.
So what are these?
Paintings. I guess they are figurative, in a way.
What would you call your style?
A nerdly-durdle, really. I've been painting since I was at art school, 1950. And on and off, I get bouts of paintology.
So how does a young, thuggish child of the war end up going to art school?
Oh, I think by then I'd caught a lot of trouble. There were some people who decided to do some sort of social engineering. And so they took us, as I remember, took us to the opera, to the ballet, to art galleries. We all became super enthusiasts for ballet and opera and looking at paintings. And they thought I had potential and said, art school's a place for you. And that's what I did. I stayed in the painting group for a little while and realised they're all bloody geniuses. So I thought I'd knock that on the head. Then the most attractive lot were these girls who were doing dress design. So I got into dress design. When I moved on to photography, I had an innate eye to knowing how a garment worked.
In 1953, fresh from art school, Duffy began designing for some small British fashion houses. A job offer soon followed from Balenciaga in Paris, but by then the budding couturier had met a pretty young secretarial student named June.
They had promised me the job in August, and you know, I couldn't go. June said to me, I'm pregnant. So I said, really? Good gracious. And so, had to get married.
With a wife and now son Chris to support, Duffy needed to make money fast. He decided to put his design dreams on hold and got an illustrator's job at Harper's Bazaar.
I think it was the art director then, she was called Jill Varney. I saw some photographic contacts on her desk, and I said, oh, they're all the same picture. She said, no, they're not. Have a look at them. They're all slightly different. So I picked up the sheet, and of course they were all slightly different of a model. So I thought, that's a darn sight easier than drawing. So I sort of thought to myself, I know what I'll do, I'll take up photography. Just thought an easy way of making money. Thought, I could do this, my sort of thing. Women, clothes, gadgets. I must have a go at it.
A series of lowly assistance jobs followed before Duffy landed in the studio of top photographer Adrian Flowers. In 1957, with just one small commission under his belt, the inexperienced upstart decided he was ready for the big time.
Put about 5 or 6 pictures together. Between 2 sheets of paper, I had the snail in the eye, some blue pictures through some wobbly glass, and went into Vogue Studios. I had to go and see Audrey Withers, who was the editor of Vogue. I met Audrey and she said yes. I mean, I wasn't doing much more than using a broom, making tea and taking a picture. The first picture I did never got published. Then the head of the studio said, Miss Withers wants to see you in her office. She said, oh, good morning, Brian, how are you? I said, I'm very well, Miss Withers. And she said, now, we've got to photograph Mr. Otto Klemperer. She said, do you know who he is? I said, well, I'm not absolutely sure, bluffing my way. Well, Klemperer was an absolute genius conductor. And she said, I just wanted to tell you what you should know. I said, yes, certainly, Miss Withers. She said, when you meet him, you call him Herr Doctor, and then as you continue the conversation, you call him Maestro. And by the way, he wants to be photographed on a Leica. I said, I don't have a Leica. She said, oh, I'm sure you'll be able to get you one. And so I went along in my tripod, a camera, which I'd never used. Door opened, and this man stood there, and he had 2 giant women, Wagnerian beauties. And I said, Herr Doctor, click my heels. And I said, Maestro, would you mind sitting here? He said, yeah. I thought, oh, good God. He's got the same expression. He had facial paralysis, which didn't help. I went through 36 exposures. There was virtually no difference. He just went... stood up, and we got to the door. He said, tell me, Mr. Photographer, is it normal that when you do the photograph, you keep the lens cap on? And went out through the door with these 2 women. At about 3:30 in the afternoon, I got a call. Would I go down and see Miss Withers? And I thought, I've only had this job 3 months, and already I've managed to get myself fired. And she said, you're not going to believe this. Those dreadful boys in the darkroom have ruined your film. And being the creep and worm and shit that I am, I said, oh my God, how awful. In the most sincere or insincere way I could muster. They'd actually covered for me. I've never forgot that. They were just wonderful. The point was ordering me to have a Leica. He thought I was going to photograph him in rehearsal. And he didn't want some clumpy idiot going click, 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 click loud while he's trying to give it rock all. And Leicas were notoriously silent. So I went along there the next time where he didn't worry about me making noise. I took it on a rolly. Oh, there he is. Yeah. He doesn't look too pleased, does he?
1958 Vogue, very little difference between 1958 Vogue and pre-war Vogue. I mean, as late as the 50s, you were slightly, it was slightly sort of déclassé to come into the office not wearing gloves and a small hat. And I think Donovan and Duffy and Bailey, who all sort of start round about the same time, bring a sense of reality into the magazine.
Most people in the 50s were pretty differential to everybody. There were some who were not that differential and said, why? Who told you so? Why should I? Go on, make me. Vogue was very class conscious, very snobby, very bitchy. I remember for one woman, I said, oh yeah, that's good, that's Petty Point. And she said, what do you say? I said, that's Petty Point. I don't know how we got into this Petty Point. She said, oh, go on, Duffy, say that again. I said, what? She said, just what you said. I said, well, it's petit point. And they all started laughing. Did you hear that? Did you hear what he calls petit point? And I thought, right. Now you're all in trouble with me.
As the 60s revolution dawned, Duffy, Bailey and Donovan set about changing the visual landscape with their new style of dynamic, in-your-face photography.
Come up, come up, come up, come up, come up. What one's trying to do is to try and make her look beautiful. If you don't do that, then you lose out. And she loses out, and then it's a bore. I think there is an actual pleasure in making someone look beautiful.
You really got me. You really got me.
The best way to illustrate it, better than anything I can say, is just look at the before and after pictures. Look at what was happening, and look at what was happening a year later, and it tells you that something quite extraordinary took place.
You got me so I can't sleep at night. Yeah.
Things changed from staid, formalised fashion into fashion for young people, and that was really cool.
It is the case that from about 1960, 61 on, the pages are enlivened. I mean, it really does look like a new era. When you see Bailey, Duffy and their girls in the pictures, it suddenly looks alive, looks like everybody's having fun. I think that was the case.
Duffy's great to work with because he's you go in there and sort of 3 hours later, when you've finished all the bottles of wine that are lying around, you know, and they sort of talked about everything, listened to 100 records of old war songs. Somebody arrives with a sort of handful of clothes, you know. Out come all the paper flowers. And he's standing there with the camera, and you have to go on talking. He makes you sing, you know. He won't take the shot, and he gets bolshy. He's not taking the picture unless you sing. Go on, sing. So you have to sing, stand there singing in the studio. It's great. So all the pictures are sort of dodgy birds with teeth showing.
Before Purdy and Patsy made her a household name, Joanna Lumley was a jobbing young model struggling to make ends meet in fashionable 60s London.
Oh, nowadays, we had to lug everything around. We had to bring all our own accessories. All your makeup, did it all. You were punctual. You were polite because the photographers were the stars in those days, not the models. But, oh, Duffy, scary. Top man, you know? Duffy didn't like people doing typically model things. He didn't like that. So he'd make you just do something a bit different, do you know what I mean? I think we have to say Thursday because it made your mouth a good shape.
Lumley became a Duffy favourite, and when he discovered the 21-year-old was also a mum, he offered to snap her with baby son Jamie.
Duffy loved children, he had his own, and he always called children babies goblins. And so when he heard I had a goblin, he must have said, bring the goblin round and I'll take a picture of you.
Today, Duffy's photographing mother and son again. It's his first proper shoot in 30 years.
How are you? God. 1,000 years.
God, Duffy.
And where is he?
Yeah, it's Jamie. A little bit bigger than when you last saw him.
How are you?
Very well.
Good to meet you.
Oh, my God.
That's fantastic.
And that's you.
That's me.
You look just like your picture.
Yeah.
Do you remember what we were doing?
What were we doing?
I think we were working a couple of days before.
Yeah.
And you mentioned him, and I said,
bring him round.
Bring him round. Bring him in.
Own boots, own dress, model's own.
You see, that's what's so interesting. This isn't the days. You have professionals. Now everybody's a bloody amateur, but they're supermodels. Beyond me.
Oh, Duffy, it's so fabulous.
Come on, sit there.
Sitting down here?
Just there. I've wiped it so you won't
Good.
Stay there. Jamie, you're going to be in this picture, dear boy. Right, do that thing in the middle there.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah, look through there. Bring that shoulder just a little more.
Do you want me to move one way or the other way? That way?
Go on.
Did you make us say Thursday, or have I made that up?
I might have said that. You said I wound you up. I'm not sure I did.
Not on that occasion.
Months from the exhibition. There's been tremendous interest in what's going on because the images haven't been seen for 30-odd years.
In his lifetime, I wanted to see him back where he deserves to be.
This is family. This is a project that's got to be done, and you know, I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe that it will be amazingly successful. For now, you know, we're up against timelines. We've got to get the definitive set together within 2 weeks now, and then we go into the process of actually producing all the prints, retouching stuff. We're on schedule, but it's relentless. It doesn't stop.
By the mid-60s, Duffy, Bailey and Donovan had become so famous that they were almost bigger than the magazines they worked for.
There is an element of these younger guys at Vogue really pushing the limits of what they could get away with, and they're always being reprimanded or scolded. And in Duffy's case, I think he's fired on at least 2 occasions.
Oh, this letter you were on about. Oh my God. I must tell you in the plainest possible terms that I consider it absolutely inexcusable not to turn up today for your sitting with Mary Holland and Millicent Martin.
Do you remember that?
No. I can't believe I did it on purpose. I must have been deranged or drunk or that bloody thing. Suddenly taken drunk. Gone out to lunch and became legless.
If somebody said to you, describe Duffy, how would you do it?
Difficult. It's difficult. Duffy and aggravation go together like gin and tonic. He was always angry at somebody.
He was a bit of a bastard, really, but one that you would enjoy having at the dinner table. Duffy was one who would, you know, inspire the miners' strike. Let's put it that way. There's something defiant and belligerent and against authority. Because he was so objectionable, he was the most interesting of the 3 Cockney photographers.
I remember one occasion, he was a reformed smoker, and we had all these big signs around the studio stuck on the wall. Don't treat this, treat this studio like your home, don't drop your cigarette ash on the floor, etc. One day, a young model, she was dropping her cigarette ash on the floor all day long. And I was amazed because Duffy didn't say anything. Until at the end of the day, she was going home and everyone was kissing, goodbye, love, little darling sort of thing, and just love to work with you again sort of thing. And Duffy just said, oh, hang on a minute, you've forgotten something. And he went back in the studio and got this enormous ashtray, just opened her handbag up and emptied it into it.
I think that's the way he is. You know, some people are tigers and some people are pussycats. I mean, when he wants, he can be the most charming man in the world. Wow. That was Donovan, wasn't it? He's got a nice head of hair, hasn't he? Yeah.
With their roguish attitudes, it was inevitable that Duffy, Bailey and Donovan would become great friends, as well as great rivals. Donovan passed away in 1996, but Duffy and Bailey remain close to this day.
Well, if you're going to have a best friend, you might as well have a shithead. That's how I describe our relationship with Bailey. He's always been the same. He's always been straight, honest, shitty. But that's why he's honest. Yeah, shithead.
When you look out through your eyes, I think we both agree we're under 30. Yes?
Yeah, I always feel about 32.
Do you? That's older than me. I've always felt about 29. You walk down the street and you pass a plate glass window and you see some old bald bloke and you think, who the hell's that? And then you realise it's you. And it's terrifying. I felt Penn and Avedon, fuck photography for us. No?
No, but I'm sure you thought it, but...
Well, I'll tell you why I thought it.
Well, I know you're going to tell us.
Do you want to hear or don't you?
Not much, but they probably do.
All right. It's both of them.
See, I told you to do it anyway. See, he's got that look on his face. Gonna get right-hander.
Now, one of the things we agree on photography is, well, I can't understand how you do it. That's what defeats me all the bloody time. Because it's the only form that any numbskull, nitwit or halfwit can do with as much competence as we do it. Or have done it, you know? And you can't do that if you pick up a violin.
Looking over there at Lord Bailey's books, do you ever wish that you'd done more stuff?
No. To be honest, no. We were just workers. We weren't art. This thing of art, there's no such thing as art photography. She was like being a plumber. Just wanted to be good at it. Except that when you had another state-registered nut, you realised you'd read a nutter, so you then got involved with them. And we did. All three of us spoke for hours and hours, ad nauseam, boring one another with all that shit. No?
Yeah, you spoke more than me. I'm sorry.
I thought you did.
No, no.
I don't know. What do you mean I spoke
50
more than
years.
you?
You're always rabbiting.
After 6 years at Vogue, Duffy was one of fashion's biggest names, but he was restless and looking for ways to spread his wings.
I started doing advertising. I bring it back to Vogue, and they were taking like 70% of it. And I felt it was totally unfair. So eventually I thought, sod you, I'll start on my own. And I did.
In 1963, now with 3 children and a 4th on the way, Duffy left the magazine to set up his own studio at the family home in London's Swiss cottage.
I mean, I photographed for Queen, Town, Nova, went over to Paris, worked for Elle, where I could really come to fruition because the frogs are always prepared to get into an argument, which I love. I think it was my best work. Those frogs, they're so demanding bastards. They would consider other possibilities. So if all the photographs are out of focus, the Brits would think, oh, God, doesn't know what he's doing, broken camera, whereas the frogs would think, interesting, I wonder if there's an attempt to express in a different way a visual perception of whatever. And then they'd say, but of course it could be a broken camera. fantastic, suited me to the ground.
I suppose the kind of, for me, the memorable shoots were the ones that we did on Nova magazine, and especially kind of how to undress in front of your husband. Someone came up with the idea of why we do an article about how a woman should actually strip for her husband or a lover, and also turn it into a fashion feature. I wanted to do this flick book, which was the full strip. And Duffy said, there's a perfect girl for this. He said, she's an ex-Crazy Horse stripper. And I said, oh, no, it's Amanda Lear, she's fantastic. The Crazy Horse was the kind of in thing at the time. I mean, you know, it was kind of expensive she clubs to go to.
I've been to see a mate of ours, Bailey and I, called Monty Landis in Paris. And he said, oh, come round and see me at the Crazy Horse. Well, we needed no encouragement to go and look at women with no clothes on. So we went round and met this fantastic stripper.
I think the shoot took over a week or maybe a bit longer. And in walked this amazing kind of, 6-foot blonde German girl. And Duffy just got the idea immediately. And I mean, without actually kind of making it over raunchy. I mean, the cover, stunning. I mean, it's just kind of this girl with actually nothing showing, but everything left to the imagination. It comes out, and it's a fantastic success, but someone tells one of the publishing director of the Nova magazine that the person on the front was a man. And I nearly got fired for it.
At what point did you realise that the woman you were photographing was actually a man?
Well, I knew she was a man because Monty had told me she was a fella when we met him later. Probably in, I don't know, a couple of months when he came back from Paris. I said, oh, you round you up, that's a guy. What?
I guess the suggestion was that you had perhaps chosen her deliberately, kind of,
Do you think that sounds like me? Do you think that sounds like me? I'm totally innocent. As a bystander, helping culture and art.
Amanda Lear has always refused to confirm or deny rumours about her gender. Duffy's unconventional ways made him a magnet for the 60s elite, and his basement studio became a hotbed of creative talent.
Downstairs was the living accommodation, and June, his wife, was there with the children, and then upstairs was studio at the front, and everything happened. Bailey used to bring in, Peter O'Toole used to come in, and they'd bring in their absolutely enormous magnums of champagne with them. And the Beatles, I think John Lennon came in, and he said, you don't mind if I just bring my friend in, Ringo, with me? We used to have Michael Caine, was in a lot.
A young David Putnam was also a frequent visitor to Duffy's studio. Then an ambitious 21-year-old advertising exec, he would later go on to be an agent to both Duffy and David Bailey.
I remember Patsy and I going over and having lunch, and I remember going up to his studio and him taking some photographs. The basement they lived in was one of the most creative environments I ever walked into in my life. I mean, Duffy couldn't have been Duffy without June and without the family. There's no possibility he would have been... Well, first of all, I think he probably would have vanished up his own orifice. The whole essence of him was this extraordinary thing he created, what they created. It had the most amazing effect on Patsy and I, because I know that we would go, we knew we want some of that. Whatever that is, I want some of that.
Good to see you. And you. Oh, God, good to see you.
Hello, darling.
Still got your earpiece on.
Oh,
good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you so much. All right, you two. Now, Patsy, come here with your old man.
Oh, I blinked, sorry.
Let me just have that back on there, just have a quick look. A fiver.
He wasn't quite as compliant with his assistant in the past. The assistant would get a terrible bollocking. It was he risked death being his assistant.
God, who types these things up? Move that way a little, the pair of you. More. Don't fall down there. Right. That's it, hold on. Do it now. Good.
By the end of the 60s, Duffy was shooting all over the world. But being a top photographer wasn't enough. The ambitious snapper had bigger plans in mind.
Well, I wanted to make a film. Having diagnosed photographs, I wondered where one could take that in film terms. I happened to be on a Saturday with Bailey, walking down from his old employer, and we arrived for some godforsaken reason at Stratford East, and there was a poster. It said, "Over the Lovely War." It was a new musical opening, and I thought, God. So I said, God, this looks interesting, to which Bailey immediately said, "What are you talking about?" with that normal sensitivity. So I conned him, so we bought 4 tickets.
The Army and the Navy need attention. The outlook isn't healthy, you'll admit. But I have a perfect dream of a...
I just was so ripped apart by this musical. I felt balls had been torn out of me. I really did. I cried. It made me cry.
He said, let's make a film called Oh, What a Lovely War. And I always thought of it as like a musical documentary. But then it started to get more and more complicated, and suddenly all the lovies were involved. So I sold my share to Len Dayton for £49. So I was probably the only person that didn't lose money on it.
Len Dayton, a writer, had been friends with Duffy since art school. Fresh from the success of the film adaptation of his book, The Ipcress File, the pair set up a production company, with Len agreeing to write the screenplay for their new venture.
Then met Dickie Attenborough. And Dickie said to him, confidentially, "I've always wanted to direct a film." Dickie's one of the most charming men you've ever met. And the most people who've done me the most damage in my life have been charming people. They release that unctuous lubricant called charm. Beware. It's not unlike KY. Get you into a lot of trouble.
Jerry, darling, if Alf rehearsed, is he going to hold you up, or would you prefer him to go to somewhere else? Because he can quite easily. You are sure?
Well, I think he kind of lost control, in a way, with all those lovies, because they're like a gang, aren't they? A gang of lovies. I wonder what you'd call a gang of lovies.
In the end, Duffy accepted a producer credit, and Len Dayton took his name off the film. It went on to win numerous awards, launching Richard Attenborough's career as a director.
I think from Dickie's point of view, it was a successful experience. I was at the premiere, ironically invited by Duffy. There was certainly a froideur between the two of them. They'd fallen out by then. Duffy would have always been trying to do something with that film, I think, that maybe was not doable, or certainly wasn't doable within the convention and norms of the time. Also, I can well imagine that he wouldn't have worked within the film industry. Film industry is very specific. It's structured. It's a series of interrelationships. You try to protect your friendships and your relationships. You try not to fall out with people. Duffy would have found that very hard.
As the 70s brought economic and social unrest to Britain, Duffy abandoned movie making and returned to photography to make a living. In 1973, he was asked to shoot a Pirelli pin-up calendar, the second of his career. But where the 60s had been all about pioneering a natural sensuality, this calendar would require a more overt sexual aesthetic.
Well, they were going to have an artist, a sexual artist, Alan Jones, who'd got a reputation for being... You know, he'd done the hat stand, you know, those models. Polanski had bought one of his tables or chairs or that. He was a really very important pre-punk artist.
Alan Jones and Duffy and Mind Boggles. I think that Alan Jones is quite a normal sort of chap, isn't he? Whereas Duffy is not a normal chap.
A company rang me and said, would you like to do a Pirelli calendar? I said if I did 12 paintings I could have an exhibition, and that it was more interesting to me to manipulate imagery that I couldn't create in my own studio. And so to have the use of a professional fashion photographer and an airbrush artist, I thought would be fun.
The idea was he would do a drawing and he'd say how he wanted to express it through a photograph that I would take, and how he would then artwork it. He gave me little sketches, layouts, which I was used to working, because loads of photographs advertising photographs stay like that.
I think when that calendar started, I think Duffy's view was that he was going to interpret these drawings. And I think that in reality what happened was that Alan Jones thought that Duffy was going to exactly copy these drawings. In other words, Duffy was only going to be a technician, physically pressing the button and doing the lighting. Whereas I don't think that's what Duffy thought at all. And the long and short of it, at the end of the day, Duffy removed his name from it.
I took my name off because I thought it was all wrong. He was getting credit for things he wasn't even at. Some of them, the photographs were taken and he wasn't involved. He was losing interest. In a way, I think he thought it was beneath him, in a way.
It distressed me that he was upset about some aspect of the project, but I didn't feel in any way that I had anything to do with that and could contribute. I mean, I was surprised that he saw it as anything else than another commercial job.
Feeling dissatisfied yet again, Duffy decided to set up a company with a young graphic designer named Celia Philo.
When I first met him, there was that awe that as a young designer you had towards somebody who'd been so kind of like, you know, a major name. Duffy Design Concepts came about because it was a case of wanting to have more control over the jobs and the projects rather than just handing back, you know, a sheet of contacts. Because I knew whatever we do would be exciting, and it was.
This is the original dye transfer of the David Bowie album, The Lad Insane. I met, I think, a sort of pocket genius called Tony DeFries. David Bowie was a client. Tony said to me, would I take some pictures of him?
There's a starman waiting in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks...
When Duffy took these early images, Bowie was in his Ziggy Stardust phase, but still only on the cusp of major mainstream success.
People always expect, talking about Bowie, some saint-like. I think it was nothing. Just a guy who liked dressing up. That's all.
So he wasn't a superstar at that point?
No way. Mark Bolan was a bigger star. Oh, yeah. Tony realised that in order to get the record companies really going, you had to get them up to their neck in debt, which was, of course, a masterstroke. He wanted to make the most expensive cover he could possibly get a record company to pay for, because he realised if it cost 50 quid, so what, one way or the other. If it costs £5,000, the record company were now having to pay attention. Couldn't have come to a better con artist than my good self. Using my experience of having done the previous Pirelli calendar, which I realised cost a few bob, I thought we'd utilise some of those techniques. Sod the aesthetic, I liked the fact, or Tony liked the fact, it was going to cost more money. He said, can you make it expensive? I said, no problem, old love. One, dye transfer. A dye transfer is a genius method of being able to spend the most amount of money to get a reproduction from a colour transparency onto a piece of paper. 2, get the plates made where? Switzerland, the most expensive place in the world to get plates made. Then to employ me to design it and create it, even better and more wasteful. And then we went to Conway's, who were the most expensive typographical house, more money.
I knew when I first saw the contact sheets, I knew it was going to be a very, very powerful album cover. Time-wise, you know, it was pre-punk, it was pre-people walking down the King's Road with coloured hair and makeup on their face. It was pre all of that. I feel very privileged to have worked alongside both Duffy and David Bowie on it.
When you take a picture like that, do you know that you've captured something great?
No, not great. I know that I've done a very competent job, up to the standard of which I would want to work. But you can't tell how it would be responded to. To me, it was competent, very competent. But I wouldn't take it much beyond that.
In 1973, Aladdin Sane became Bowie's first UK #1 album, and the first of 3 covers the Star Maker would shoot for the Star Man.
I think he was a terrific problem solver. I think he loved the technical challenge of having to fulfill a brief, of bringing a great many skills together to make a picture that would work, that would satisfy the professional brief, work on the page, fulfill the client's expectations.
The whole thing was, for me, was hit and miss. And I was always trying technical things that other people hadn't. You know, I mean, one of the great problems in photography is once you've resolved something, why change it if it works? Obviously, I have something wrong with my thinking process. It's the exact opposite. Once I know something doesn't work, do something, you know, I mean, just always put your finger into the fan.
I think he got off on solving technical problems. He liked all that, you know, we're going to put the plug here, we're going to put the Christmas tree upside down there, and all that Magrittesism, and he loved all that.
I used him for B&H because I needed somebody really good to work on it. I thought Duffy was just the man for it. I've nothing but admiration for him, incidentally. I think he's a genius. One day, I remember this now, he left his processing to a junior, and the junior had no idea how to process film. Well, sacked the entire staff because of that. We were all sacked, the staff, me, the client, and we all had to go to the Hilton Hotel.
Thinking of the commercial campaigns that he pulled off so effectively, I feel that the Benson and Hedges campaign is perhaps top of the list. I think that is an absolute triumph of everything that he was so good at. And curiously completes the circle going back to that very first photograph of the snail and the eye, of a surrealistic or disconcerting graphic notion playing, in the case of Benson and Hedges, with surprises of scale and context, and also dealing with the very considerable technical challenges of making those pictures at a time when Photoshop didn't exist. Duffy the problem solver.
Throughout the 70s, Duffy was still in demand, but his 20 years at the top were beginning to take their toll.
99.9% of my work was advertising. Putting cream on babies' bums and rubbing it on. People putting toothpaste in their gob and doing this. Putting something on their hair and doing that. That was 99% of my work. Crap.
I think certainly by the time I came to work for him, I think he was getting bored. He was still interested in trying new techniques. But there weren't many jobs that we did which I would say extended him.
The people who were hiring me I didn't like. You know, it's like being on the game, disliking the men who are fucking you.
Tell me where we're going.
We're going to King Henry's Road because that's where I had a studio. And we're going there, which of course would be very exciting for you and for, I guess, the inhabitants of King Henry's Road. Now, this story might be absolute crock of shit and lies. It's the way I've been able to put it together in my cranium. I came in to start work, and an assistant said, "I've got any toilet paper?" And I realised at the moment, within a flash, trice, I was now Commander-in-Chief, Managing Director, Senior Partner, making decisions about toilet paper. And I thought, this has got to end. Either by me murdering my staff, killing myself, or setting fire to the whole fucking thing. I asked them all to leave, and during the course of that morning, decided to burn my negatives. My career went down the bog with a piece of paper. So here we are, Linda. I set fire to boxes of negs, which burnt very inefficiently, and I stoked them. And finally somebody turned up on the other side of that was a wooden fence. Said, "What are you doing?" It was obvious what I was doing, burning stuff, and they said, "You can't do that, we're from the council." And so I put it out.
I understand that as you were burning your work, that Bailey played a part in all of this. What role did Bailey play?
Absolutely useless. I guess he was driving up the road, so he came in. I think he stood there like a spare dick at an Italian wedding, and then said, "Oh, I could look after those for you." I said, "Don't bother." And then went. Somebody later said, or he said to them, they helped me save them. He did no such thing. See, that's the sort of turd he is.
It was an incredibly significant moment in your life, wasn't it?
Not really, no. Just one thing I didn't want to do anymore, that's all. When anything's destroyed, people wonder what was there. Well, I mean, it'd be a crock of shit that I left. Worse than the stuff we've still got. Everybody thinks it might be full of gems.
Over the last few weeks, Duffy's lung condition has been getting worse, and it's touch and go whether he'll make the big opening. So he's at the Mayfair Gallery viewing the space where his work will soon be hanging for the first time ever.
How does it feel? You're seeing these blank walls thinking you've got to fill them.
How does it feel? Well, I mean, they're just images that I've taken, and presumably will be exposed on these walls, and presumably people will react to them, whether they, like them or dislike them, I suppose. It's like any image, like any painting, like any illustration. So how do I feel? I'll be intrigued to see what they like and don't like.
Why did you never have a show before?
I'd never thought of it. I'd never wanted it. I just thought a photograph was almost immediate, had an immediate use. The next day, that whole thing of wrapping your fish and chips in it. Art photography is a very, very modern idea. Look at that plug. I'm looking at it, and it's so isolated there. I think to myself, it's really rather pleasant looking. Now, is that a work of art? That MK plug. It is, if you say it is. Never trust any artist ever telling you any bloody thing. They're all a bunch of liars. Artists, absolutely, on any subject, is always talking drivel, including moi, because the work is the statement, right?
Duffy's not here because his condition at the moment would be overwhelming to see this many people, and he just wouldn't have the energy level to deal with it, really. It's the culmination of a lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and it's just been such a fantastic night. It's been rammed since 6 o'clock, and just so many people from the past, everyone loving it. It's fantastic.
It's an absolute delight. What a pity that he's not here. He popped in earlier, but to enjoy it. It's very Duffy to not turn up to his own party.
I think they're brilliant. Yes. You know, it's nice to see Duffy as opposed to Bailey or Donovan. So we don't often get the chance, and we nearly didn't get the chance because we nearly got rid of them all.
To be somewhere like here and see how many people here for the sake of my granddad and his work, it's quite good knowing that, especially that I'm his grandchild and the rest of us are. It's a big achievement. Yeah, it makes me feel proud of him, definitely. Definitely, it makes me feel proud of the whole family as well. It's a good look, it's a good look. Very good. Very proud of him.
I had nothing more to say in photographs. I'd taken all the snaps I needed to take. Maybe I didn't think I was good enough. You know, keeping a civil tongue up the rectum of a society that keeps you paid is an art, which I was devoid of.
I mean, I know critics and others will have their opinions about where you sit in the sort of annals of photography. Where is it for you?
He wasn't as steady as a tripod.